Welcome to Navigating Advocacy, the true crime podcast that goes beyond storytelling to ignite change and seek justice. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Whitney. As true crime enthusiasts turned passionate advocates, we've seen the power of storytelling raise awareness about unsolved crimes and bring hope to victims and their families. We hope to inspire action and promote positive change within the true crime community.
Our mission is simple. We provide a platform for victims and their families to share their stories, to be heard, and find solidarity. But we don't stop there. We offer practical guidance to our listeners on how they can actively make a difference in their own communities.
Together, we can create a wave of change. We're here to empower you to also become advocates for change, no matter where or who you are. We are Navigating Advocacy.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I can't believe the year is just about done.
Every week we say that, and every week it just seems absolutely insane that it's about to be 2024. But I'm ready for it. You know how we love fresh starts. And so what's
true.
more
This
of a
is
fresh
true.
start than a whole new year?
This is true. We do like it. We're going to start a new list. We got all kinds of crazy
Yep.
things coming in 2024. We're one step closer to advocacy conference, and I'm stoked.
I am so stoked. It's so exciting because it's so far away, or it seems so far away. I kind of forget about it every now and then. And then once I remember, I'm like, holy crap, we're putting on an entire conference to help families advocate for their missing or murdered loved ones. And it's just so amazing.
I know. If you haven't seen any information posted about it, go check it out. It's advocacycon.com. There's a bunch of information. Families can go on there. You can sponsor a family. There's all kinds of good stuff on there. So go check it out.
Exactly. I guess that's all we got.
Yep. Let's
All
jump right
right.
into Delaware.
Delaware.
The only D state.
Yes. Have you ever been to Delaware?
I have not.
I have not either. I don't really know a lot about Delaware. And what
I mean,
I
it's
have
little bitty.
learned, it's a little bitty. What I've learned, I don't exactly love it. Not going to lie, so far. Eek. Wilmington is the largest city in the state of Delaware. It is located in the northeastern part of the state along the Christina River. Wilmington has a rich history dating back to the early Dutch and Swedish settlers of the 17th century. The city played a significant role in the American Revolution and the Civil War. It is known for being a major financial center with many banks and credit card companies headquartered there. The city has a diverse economy that includes finance, insurance, healthcare, and manufacturing. The crime stats are alarming, and I swear neighborhoodscout.com rates every town we ever cover in the single digits as far as safety is concerned. I'm like, are there any safe places? Because it seems like Neighborhood
Yes.
Scout
Says no.
says
It does
no.
feel that way.
It says no.
It does say no. Although we did have one last week in our missing persons cases that was surprisingly safe.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So Wilmington is rated a 1, which means it is
Holy moly.
yeah, because you can't do 0. Means it is
Wow.
more dangerous than 99% of other cities in the United States. To put this in perspective, national average violent crime rate is a 4. State of Delaware is a 4.2, and then we have Wilmington, which is a whopping 15.
Holy cow.
15.
Holy cow. And it's so
I-
little.
I
The state
know.
is so little. I can't even imagine that I feel like there would be crime all around you all the time.
Yes, especially Wilmington being the largest city in Delaware. That just, can you imagine if Wilmington was taken out of the equation, what Delaware's crime rate would be lowered to? Because obviously Wilmington is factored in Delaware's 4.2 rating. So if you just took that one out of there, it would be like a 0. It's the safest place to live
It
if you didn't
probably
have
would.
Wilmington.
Yeah,
I was just
no
shocked
crime at
'cause
all.
It just you think of Delaware, I just think of I don't know, I this is where stereotypes go into play because I'm just like, I just think it's like a bunch of financial workers that go to work and come home and it's just all snowy around. That's all I think about of Delaware.
I'm I mean, yeah, I can see that.
So, or Wilmington is not a safe place to say the least. And today we are discussing the murder of a beloved high school teacher. And that is why we are navigating advocacy in Delaware. Susan Ledyard, formerly Susan Morrissey, was just 50 years old when she was found dead in a river just 1 mile from her house. Susan was born June 7th, 1969, in Westchester, Pennsylvania. She had two sisters, Meg and Missy, and one brother named John. Susan attended private school most of her life, and then when it was time for her to go to college, she set her sights on Georgetown University for her undergraduate degree, and then San Francisco University for her master's in education. She would spend a year teaching overseas, and then she went back to California for a short stint before making her way to Wilmington, Delaware area, where she took a position as a high school language arts teacher at Academy Park High School in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania. Susan was described as a bookworm, to say the least. She was always seen every school break with at least one book in her hand. She was always reading more than one book at any given time throughout the entire year. She was a deep thinker and an advocate for human rights. Susan married a man by the name of Ben Ledyard just 3 years before her murder. Ben had two daughters that became Susan's stepdaughters. The couple seemed to have a loving relationship. Ben was a managing director of U.S. Trust, and he was on the board of trustees for the Delaware Museum of Natural History, according to his LinkedIn profile. So this just seemed like your middle-aged couple that they each had their own lives going on. She's a teacher, he's this bigwig exec in finance. They married late in life. He was married once before. I'm not for sure if Susan was ever married before this, but she did not have any biological children. And they had known each other for a while before they ended up in this relationship and they got married. And Ben described her as his best friend, the love of his life. Susan was full of life and she just loved to go on vacation. She had, I believe her family had a beach house that she would love to sit by the beach and just read one of her many books. And she was one of those teachers that students would refer to years later about, oh, tell me your favorite teacher in high school. Tell me a teacher that you remember. Her name would always come up. She wasn't the type of English teacher that was obsessed with grammar rules and, the Oxford commas and all that kind of thing. She was more into teaching them literature and the classics and helping her students form this love of reading just like she had. That is what was important to her, and that is what stuck out to her students. Susan was a night owl, especially in the summer months when she didn't have to go to school early the next morning, to say the least. And she would often be texting her friends late into the early morning hours. And this was no different than on July 23rd of 2019. She may have been, I think she I wasn't a millennial, but she definitely took the millennial texting vibe. A lot of her friends say she would much rather text you an entire story than pick up the phone and call. It was about 2:45 a.m. when Susan ended her texting conversations with her friends. This was nothing out of the ordinary. It was just, text messages back and forth, normal chatter, but it is what happened next that left authorities baffled. So you see at 3:02 a.m., Susan's car pulls out of her driveway, and roughly 2 minutes later, it parks on Walker Mill Road. This is just about a mile or so from her house. Now, once the vehicle is parked in this area and the headlights turn off, any surveillance footage that was able to capture Susan's car pulling into this parking spot, that ended right there because there was not enough light to be able to tell if anyone got in or if anyone got out of this vehicle. From this point, authorities do know that the time it would have taken from her house to get to this wherever she parked was the correct amount of time that passed from when they knew she left her house to when they saw the car pull up on surveillance. So they know she didn't stop anywhere else. It was a straight trek to wherever she parked.
Did they get the information of where she left the house? Was it like a security system she saw? Was it cell phones? Was it low jack on her car? Like, how did they know the exact time she left?
They never said they had surveillance at her house, which I can't understand how they wouldn't have a Ring doorbell camera of some sort, but she also had a Fitbit tracker on, and this is how I think a lot
Perfect.
we're gonna discuss this Fitbit tracker quite extensively, but they know Susan left. They don't really know if anyone was with her, which I'm like, if they had surveillance, how could they not have seen her leave the house? But let's just say they didn't have a Ring doorbell camera. So they know Susan left, but they don't
Okay.
know if anyone was with her. And once she arrived at this parking spot about a mile away, they are able to see her vehicle on surveillance. And once those headlights turned off, nothing, they can't see anything else after that.
Okay.
From this point on, authorities do not know what Susan was up to, but they do know that she was active from this time until about 7 a.m. that morning because of this Fitbit. And they go on, and I did some slight research on Fitbits and how they work, and we'll kind of get into that because I still have so many questions if about the Fitbit and the information that they could have. Because obviously, this is a relatively new case. It's 2019, but police aren't giving us specifics. They're saying, "We know she was active from 3 AM until 7 AM." And so, as far as what she was doing in at that point of time, they have no clue, or they have not released it to the public. Plenty of questions when it comes to Susan being active. This information comes directly from the Fitbit website. I took this snippet of information to figure out what exactly is being tracked by the Fitbit. And it says to be able to count the number of steps, there is a finely tuned algorithm that detects unique motion patterns. The motion patterns must be large enough to meet a specific threshold of the algorithm, meaning that some steps could go unaccounted for if walking on soft carpet, but then if you're on a bumpy road, it could add steps. This is definitely not as precise or foolproof as you would think it would be. Fitbits are on your arm. So if she's moving her arms back and forth, that would pick up on her possibly walking, and that was what would relay to the steps, in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay, now I obviously don't know which Fitbit, which capability. If it tracks her heartbeat or her heart rate, then we've got some other stats that we can work with. However, authorities have never expressly stated we that, oh, based on her heart rate or based on this, we know she was active. They just said we know she was active from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. And I'm thinking, could whatever happened to her, could she have been being carried and the Fitbit register that movement as, as her walking? Or like you need this
I feel like it definitely
it's
could. I mean, I had an early Fitbit and I remember cheating the system to get to my 10,000 steps of putting it like attaching it to the dog and let the dog run around or just shaking it to count steps. I remember that there were ways around it where as an Apple Watch doesn't, it's a little bit more precise now. And I'm sure that was early, like probably 2010, 2011 when the first Fitbits
yes.
came out. So I'm sure they've improved their technology a bit. But I can see where if she's being carried and bounced, while
Yes.
walking, that it could still count the
Yes. And
steps if her arm is
yeah, and
moving.
that's if that's what they're going based off of is the steps. Could they be going based on her heart rate? Because they do have that. And could they tell I mean,
Yeah.
but you would assume if there was, like, a violent altercation or something, her heart rate would peak up and then would just crash out. I read a few forums on Fitbits to kinda gauge what consumers of Fitbits really said, and they said it's very finicky, and sometimes it would work properly, and sometimes it wouldn't. Even I believe I read that even after someone is deceased, it still said that they had a heart rate. So, who knows what we really can take from this and not. Police are certain that she was active. They do not believe she was killed before 7 a.m., and they have been actively trying to find anyone who have may seen her between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. that morning. That very day at 7:39 a.m., so this is 40 minutes after she was no longer active, the body of Susan Ledyard was recovered from the Brandywine River. And this is in the area of Northeast Boulevard, right there in Wilmington, Delaware. Someone found her very quickly after she was
Very quick.
possibly dumped in the river. And the fact that someone did find her was this quickly was honestly amazing because this is even before anyone knew she was missing, and finding someone this quickly aids in the fight for justice significantly. It has been 4 years and the case is still unsolved, obviously, but I feel like so much more evidence and possibly even Susan would have never been found considering this is a river and it does move out to sea. They could have possibly never even found her. So just a few hours after Susan was found, her vehicle is found, and that was about 8:54 a.m., and her purse and her cell phone were still inside. The vehicle was parked adjacent to a different bridge, Rising Sun Lane Bridge, which went over the Brandywine River. This was approximately 3 miles upriver from the location where Susan was recovered. Did they park it whoever did this, did they happen to be like, "Okay, if we park it here upriver, we go down, discard her body, it could look like it was a suicide." Because if she would have jumped off that bridge and then floated down the river, where she was recovered would be accurate.
It could be, or was she murdered and her body disposed of over the bridge and result in the same situation?
Police do believe she did not enter the water there at that bridge. I That's another thing I don't know how they know, but they said she did not enter the water there. And I wonder
Then chances are she didn't commit suicide
yes, no, like, it
by jumping off that
yes, she
bridge.
did not commit suicide. Did they figure out she didn't enter the water there because of the Fitbit tracker and they know it was active in a different location? Because I don't even know, do Fitbits track your location, like, specifically like Apple Watches do?
I think it depends on which model you have because I know that at one point your Fitbit could connect with your Nike Plus account for runners
That's right.
and then you would have the GPS thing. Once Apple Watch came out with their watches, I've had an Apple Watch since
Yeah.
then, so I don't it's technology and you know how Whitney is with it's
Yeah.
minimal. Whitney's knowledge
Like,
of technology
I
is
don't know
minimal.
how it works, I just know it works. But I only know that for Apple Watch because that's what I have.
Right. I'm married into the technology. So I have someone to ask questions, but he's not going to know about
Yeah,
Fitbits. So I don't know,
yeah.
maybe.
There's a possibility that's how they know. Not quite sure how they know, but they say she did not enter the water at that bridge. Another thing to note is that this tracker only recorded 1 mile of steps in that 4 hours that Susan was unaccounted for. But the car was found 3 miles away from her body. So, how did that happen? She didn't obviously walk all the way that way. So that's unless it just but you think it's ground, it's not soft carpet, so it would probably pick up more steps than less steps. So obviously she had to been carried or
Did it die? Was it
I believe
I mean, I'm assuming it's
up
operational.
until 7 a.m. it was operational at the very minimum.
Hmm.
I do want to go over Ben, who is Susan's husband's statement of what happened that night. Ben told detectives that he had gone to see a movie with a friend around 8 p.m. When he got home, he said Susan was on the back porch drinking wine and texting on her phone. He stayed up with her for a little while. Then, as he was going up to bed, he told her that they had a busy day the next day and she shouldn't stay up too late. The couple had plans to go see the Rolling Stones in concert, and so Susan just stated like she wouldn't be up too much longer, and Ben went off to bed. Ben woke up to the police at his door informing him that his wife was no longer alive.
Oh my gosh.
He was never even aware that she was missing. He really didn't know what she would be doing out that late. He speculated that he hoped that she wasn't having an affair and she wasn't there meeting someone, but he honestly had no idea. He did tell authorities that she may have taken an Ambien to help her sleep and could she have slept walked. The whole family, her sisters, her mother, and everyone really thought this was some terrible accident and that she somehow fell into the river or something bad happened. They never expected it to come back as murder. And it would take 4 months before the results of the autopsy would come back, and it did reveal that Susan died of blunt force trauma and drowning, and her death was ruled a homicide at this point. This left her family reeling because they honestly thought that it was an accident. They could never imagine someone wanting to harm this school teacher. It left them struggling to accept, to say the least.
Did they have a toxicology report done to see if she had Ambien in her system? And I know that being in the water can affect that, but she wasn't in the water very long, it sounds like, since they found her so quickly. Decomposition hadn't set in just yet, and they would have been able to get a fairly accurate reading in her bloodstream if she had taken
So,
it.
yes, they did do a toxicology report. The results of that have not been released. It said they didn't actually see the records, but they said she did not have Ambien in her system in an unofficial
Okay.
capacity. Even with finding Susan so quickly and knowing where she was prior to her murder, it has left authorities with more questions than answers. In September of 2021, just over 2 years after the murder of his second wife, Susan, Ben married another woman. I believe it was about 6 months after he started dating her. Her name was Stephanie.
Okay.
They weren't together very long before Ben was charged and convicted of assault on this wife of an incident that happened on New Year's Day of 2023. He apparently struck his wife over the head with a marble block during this fight. He then grabbed her hair and smashed her head repeatedly into the hardwood floor. On a different occasion, Ben, allegedly, because he's never been convicted of this one, bit off the tip of her pinky finger, and he stated to her that he may have swallowed it. She
Okay, this took not a turn I was
I
expecting.
know. So Stephanie did go to the hospital for the injury to her pinky finger, but she told doctors that she heard it like on a door frame. Later, once police arrived for this New Year's incident, she did tell them, like, hey, just like a couple months prior, he did this to me. I lied at the hospital because he was right there with me. And so he was like arrested and charged that night with a couple of different assault charges against her. Later this year, because this all happened in 2023, he had another incident where police were called when he was renting an Airbnb and the neighbors heard yelling and banging next door. So they called authorities and police show up, and Ben was with an unidentified female. Now, I don't know if this means the female left prior to the police arriving or if they somehow just never got her name, but it's only reported as an unidentified female, and Ben caused over $1,700 in destruction to this property. Holes were punched in walls, blood was on the carpet, on towels, in the bathroom. Literally throughout the house, there was blood. The kitchen door was broken. So obviously, it seems like Ben has a big fat anger problem. And the fact that
Yeah, a
He's
little
a
bit.
big dude too. He stands 6 foot 6 inches tall, and I believe he's somewhere closer to, like, 300 pounds. He's a big boy. He can definitely do some damage. Police contacted Stephanie, so the 3rd wife, to just check on her and make sure that she wasn't the unidentified female at the Airbnb, and she did tell authorities that she was not there. So this was most likely another woman that he had decided to get violent with. Susan had never mentioned that Ben was violent with her to anyone, none of her friends, none of her family member, no one ever knew if this did happen with her. Now, could he have had some mental health issues after the murder of his wife? I believe his mother died not too long after Susan was murdered. So could this all be new violent tendencies and doesn't portray who he was prior to Susan? I don't know. I'll leave that to all of you listeners, but usually once a person's violent, because he seems very violent, they've been violent for a while, didn't just start up abusing women on when you're 55 years old. Could he have had something to do with the murder of his wife? He would have to be very smart to get away with Susan's murder. It's not unheard of, that's for sure. It's just very crazy. The fact that no one knows why Susan went out that late at night. No one knows if she was supposed to be meeting someone or if she actually met them. There's just so many questions with little to no answers. Honestly, there hasn't been any new information or any person of interest released, and Susan's family is doing everything they possibly can to keep her name in the media. They have a Facebook page that's called Who Killed Susan. They started a foundation called the Susan Morrissey Foundation. Obviously, they chose to use her maiden name and not her married name. I don't know, that kind of speaks volumes. Yes, they were only married 3 years, and she was Morrissey 47 years of her life. It just seems weird that they decided not to use her married name.
Well, with the suspicions that are surrounding her husband as a potential person of interest, I can see where they would want to kind of create a little bit of separation, even if it wasn't anything bad.
Agreed, agreed. This foundation gives students at the high school that she taught cash scholarships who excel in the subject of English and who demonstrate a love of reading. So her name lives on through that. However, her family is doing everything that they can to get the word out because someone has to know something. Lots of questions and very little answers. But if anyone out there has any information about Susan's death or who may have seen something that morning that she was killed, they are asked to contact Daniel Grassi at 302-365-8441, or you can email daniel.grassi@delaware.gov. There is a $50,000 reward in this case.
Oh, I wonder. I feel like they have so much technology information that there's going to be something that's there that they just need that one little piece to put the two together
Agreed.
to get an answer.
Agreed. I did read one comment from just someone that was commenting on a public forum that said this person was down by this river walking, and a man approached her and was talking to her about, "Oh, did you know that this is where that Susan died?" And it was very sketch to her. It seemed very weird. And so she did contact authorities and let them know. So there's constant tips coming in. The fact she was found so quickly, I believe this one can really be solved. Someone has to know something out there. So if you do, please come forward. We want to share a few ways you can support us to continue our mission. You can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $1 per month, or a simple rate and review on your favorite podcast platform helps us get in front of someone who may know something.
We will continue traveling state by state seeking justice because we will be there no matter where,
No matter who.